Okay. Um, Hello, everyone. I think we are um, live. We are global, and we have this panel regarding pathway to success, job opportunities for PhD students or postdoc or general computer science. Here, I mean, before starting is all, I mean, we had several of these lives. It's the well-known computer scientists, including the current panel that we have it. And also putting my courses online, I strongly encourage everyone to do that. It's very useful, actually. You don't need to teach a course to new grad students, just that go and watch my videos at YouTube, that the whole course is there. So please do so. In this live, we are mainly focusing on academic job and research positions in industry labs. So the concept that we are talking or the topics that we are discussing, it might be not all necessary or necessarily relevant for a like a software engineer position, but I think it should be good information even for those people. Uh, Also, I think one reason to have this one is essentially for the DEI, like diversity and equity, because there are some people in uh, like some places that advise their or they have access to the people who can essentially guide them through this process. We try to have something that everyone can watch it and use it, and hopefully it will be useful for everyone. We try to add, I mean, some information, hopefully. More than like asking from ChatGPT from the process. That's a good thing, by the way, as well. But we try to add more. And here I want to say that the experts mentioned by the panelists are just their own essentially opinions and not that of their university or companies that they are affiliated with. Good. Having said that, here I wanted to the topic that we are discussing here, we are talking about the essentially career paths, like what is the application process, how do the people evaluate your applications, what are the important things for the interview process and negotiation, academy versus industry, and again, industry research lab mainly, and the long-term success and networking. Maybe the early on, not later. Each of these probably we can have a separate live for it. We try to be very, I mean, short and brief. Hopefully, these are the information that will be useful for you. So we have a great set of, I mean, distinguished panelists here. Professor Lance Fortnow, he's currently the Dean of College of Computing at Illinois Institute of Technology, IIT, and he was the Dean of Science before there, and also he has been the chair at the CS at Georgia Tech, and also he was in Northwestern Chicago before. So the long history. I mean, he can tell more about us. He's working more on computational complexity, but he has a very good, I mean, knowledge about the whole field. We have a great set of people. Then we have me, of course. I mean, hopefully you know about me. I'm currently a professor at the University of Maryland. I've been also in lots of companies, Amazon, Microsoft, Stock, Google, AT&T, and others. And I'm working more on algorithms and game theory. We have Dr. Nicole Immorlica. She was actually a professor at Northwestern University, but joined Microsoft. She is currently senior principal researcher at Microsoft. And she's also working on econ and computations. Finally, we have Professor Samir Khuller. He has been the chair at the Northwestern University at CS department. He was our chair at the University of Maryland before. And here, actually, Lance and Samir both, they have been the chair of SIGACT, which is a special interest group on algorithms and computation theory. It's a very, it's like if you think about algorithm, that's essentially, or theoretical computer science, it is that. But lots of these things that we are mentioning due to the experience of the people is about the general CS we are talking about. Maybe not general all aspect of it, but lots of aspects. So we have also good diversity. I mentioned already the universities we are associated with here. I mean, Lance, me, and Nicole all got PhD from MIT. Samir got a PhD from Cornell. So in that sense, I mean, we are having also talk about the diverse set of universities. And also, I mean, I don't want to go to all the details to save time, but I mean, I want to say that I mean the set of panelists that we have are very distinguished set of people here, the others, these they have lots of awards. Lots of them are ACM fellow, IEEE fellow, ECS fellow, Sloan fellow, as I mentioned, SIGAC chairs. And here, I think that was a brief intro. I want to say, any of the people want to say a little bit about themselves briefly, add anything to that, and then we will start. I think starting with Nicole.
Oh, sure. Yeah, so as Talkie mentioned, I am a researcher at Microsoft, and I lead the economics and computation group there. I have provided other leadership roles in the community around that. So I was the chair of SIG Ecom, for example, and I'm very involved in the ACM conference on economics and computation, known as EC. My research interests are in economics and computation, and I particularly like doing research at the intersection of computer science and economics with people from both fields. And I think that this is a really interesting career path for computer science in particular, as we've seen with the Nobel Awards this year. Although computer science has fantastic contributions to adjacent fields, and if you have passions in that direction, getting involved in intersections, I think, is a really impactful way to play out your career.
Okay, Lance and then Samir. I think we just say some random order. Sorry, sometimes I need to check the whole like the setup, make sure that everything are live, there is no problem, etc. So if you see, I see them.
I think
Yeah,
you
go
got
ahead. Yeah, Lance, please.
okay. Yeah, no, I think you got my background pretty well covered. I mean, the other thing I like to do a lot is writing. So I've been, I'm still writing, the theoretical computer science blog that we started in 2002. So that's been a while. And I did work slightly in industry. I did 4 years in NEC research around that time, 1999 to 2003. Um, uh, so, I mean, to me, it's just a very, as Nicole's saying, sort of an incredibly exciting time to be in computing. This real transformation we're seeing towards machine learning and data and optimization is really changing the way we think about how computing is and its applications to just about everything. So it's a fun time. It's a great time to be involved. A great time to be a computer scientist. And I think even as a theorist, you really have to think about the implications of what we're doing in our field to pretty much everything, particularly society as a whole.
Yeah, I think yeah, we are all.
Thanks, Lance. I can go next. Yeah. So I just wanted to quickly add a few words to what Mohammed already said. So I haven't moved around different universities nearly as much as my colleagues here on the panel. I was at University of Maryland on the faculty from 1992 to 2019, and then I joined Northwestern about 5.5 years ago. At Maryland and here for the last, I guess now decade of being chair, not only did I interview and so on of many candidates in theoretical computer science and algorithms, which is closer to my area, but also across the board. So, for example, when I was at UMD, we started efforts in both spearheading machine learning as well as quantum computing. And some of those efforts are now continuing here at Northwestern. We have made our first quantum computing hire last year, and we're continuing to grow in that space as well as machine learning. So yeah, in general, I have a pretty broad breadth of exposure to different areas, meeting all these candidates, and I'm happy to contribute any suggestions I have for people on the job market soon.
Okay, great. Brief introduction from everyone. So, and again, one important thing, we are actually live at YouTube. If you go to YouTube live, in the chat, you can actually ask questions. I try to look at it, and if there are some questions we can ask. In the meanwhile, we have several questions that gathered, among us, several of the panelists, they have suggested. And of course, some of them also, we know there's a ChatGPT time. We have also got essentially some questions from ChatGPT as well. But I mean, this is essentially lots of people helped on this regard. Great. Now, I think let's start. And yeah, I think you can see us at YouTube. That's the only one platform that you can see it live now. Good. And let me start with the whole process. The whole process that you are essentially a PhD student or a postdoc, you decide that you want to apply. What do you do? I mean, first you will go and search. I mean, some of the good things that was my time, I think the panelists can add more to that, like ACM jobs or CRA jobs, and more importantly, the website of the universities. And I think for a research center, Nicole can add to that. They can go and try to see what are the open positions. Of course, they can contact the people in the field. That is very important. We will discuss that whether you should contact or your advisor should contact. But anyhow, I think the contact is very important because at least they will consider your application. Then you will contact the people, you will prepare your materials, your CV, research, and teaching statement, especially if, teaching especially is needed for academic positions, maybe less important essentially for industrial labs. So still you need to give a very good talk and essentially everyone should be happy. Then you will apply and then wait for interview, hopefully, if you get it. And during this time, this is the part that some kind of behind the scene is happening. What will happen generally, Dean, we have all people here, they will talk more about it. Dean essentially allows the chair of the department. Dean essentially, you can think about, chair, essentially chair of the department. Dean is one level up, several departments together, generally called college. That is the dean is essentially the CEO of that entity. And chair is somehow CEO of the department. Then the dean usually allows, chair to hire if there is no freeze, etc. There are some positions will be available. And then the chair generally is not, does not want to select the people, even interview himself. And of course, we want to have the conflict of interest. I don't want to go through all the details of that, but generally, chair form a search committee and possibly a chair of that search committee. This search committee generally might be different in different universities. They may need to also essentially pass some kind of meeting that is the charge essentially is set on those people. It means that they talk about diversity, the way that they need to consider application, there should be less bias, etc. These are some of the things that the university provides. Similar things also happen at industry, might be not that formal, but still they generally, for example, at Amazon, I'm not sure about like Google or Microsoft, they have essentially a committee that decides. Generally, not just the manager can hire you. There should be some consensus among the whole committee that they want to hire. So during this time, the search committee go essentially through all applicants and they try to find the top applicants. It might be the case that for this top applicant, there are phone interview nowadays. Sometimes there is, sometimes not. You just hear essentially, I got the invitation. Then you go for invitation, and then at this time, then you need to do interview. Generally, you need to give a talk. This is the case again for the research and industrial lab. Also, you need to give a talk. So in that sense, they are very similar. You will talk with lots of people. They may ask questions, and then again, some behind the scene is happening. The people, they generally go to this APT meeting called like among the faculty or other people. There is some vote on that, and the people who got the top vote, in this case, essentially selected by generally the department gives such kind of recommendation to the chair. At the end, the chair decides what are the order or whether he or she wants to essentially give an offer. Then all this should be approved by the dean. And then if it gets approved, then you may hear sooner, but still you will say, okay, we want to give you an offer. There are some essentially wait because the dean and sometimes provost and president may need to also approve it. And then you will get an offer. And then after that time, you are a happy person. Then you will go and think about what you can do after that. We will talk mainly in this process, maybe a little bit at the beginning of your career, but that will be the whole things that we will cover hopefully in this time. Okay, so having this intro, I think we want to go actually with we are going random order. So in this case, we are going with Samir. So I think as the chair, we want to add more that, and then last boss at the chair and the dean can add more, and then we talk. Nico.
Sure, I'm happy to go next. Thanks for bringing up, and I'm glad Lance is here. And every school may have slightly different variations of roughly the process Mohammed talked about. So our dean kind of gets involved much more in the end game once the department formally has recommended an offer to be made to a candidate. The search committee is quite broad. We usually have 6 to 8 faculty serving on the search committee. And the search committee meetings will actually begin immediately after the deadline, starting in, say, early December. And they go all the way till mid-February, typically, until all invitation offers are made. The search committee, again, then consults with other faculty members who are specialists in their areas to try to narrow down the list of candidates. So just to give you some numbers, last year we had almost close to 700 applicants, and we invited about 18 for an on-campus visit. As Mohammed mentioned, there were several more candidates who we offered a Zoom interview to, and that was typically handled by the research groups. So the theory group, for example, that I'm a member of, basically made a short list of about 10, 12 candidates. We conducted Zoom interviews with them, and then we sort of narrowed down the list to suggesting to the search committee who the top 4 or 5 should be to be invited for an on-campus visit. Once the on-campus visit happens, in a way, the whole department is involved, not just the theory group. So that's an important piece of advice I have for candidates, is that typically the faculty close to your research area have been your primary advocates until now. They understand your work, they looked at your papers. But after that, you're really interviewing with the whole department. And so it becomes a very democratic process. And anybody who comes to your talk, anybody who meets with you is going to weigh in and fill in an anonymous feedback form. And those feedback form goes back to the search committee. The search committee collects all this input and then makes a presentation to the faculty about who the top candidates appear to be based on the feedback that was received. And then once a candidate is approved by the broad faculty in a vote, yes or no, they move into a special set where then the chair steps in and then decides, as Mohammed said, the order in which offers can be made. The market is quite tough hiring market in a way, because if we only invite 18 candidates, on average, I've noticed that these candidates have 8 to 10 other interviews. So they are highly sought after. They have lots of offers. So the ordering of the offers becomes important. And often we reach the full list and everybody in that set ends up getting an offer simply because the first few candidates have so many offers that within 2-3 weeks they reject our offer. So yeah, it's a pretty long process, and we start making offers in early March typically, and that goes on till May actually. So that's kind of roughly how things are.
Okay, do you want us to intercede with?
Sure, please, yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so I think one thing that I always wondered when I was on the market is like how to strategize about getting places to interview me. So you mentioned that they get like 8 to 10 other interviews. Maybe Chicago Northwestern is a particularly fantastic match for me for personal reasons. How can I signal this? How can I be one of those 18, even when I might not be at the rank that you're targeting as a university?
So rather than every candidate, like I said, there were 700 applicants reaching to the chair. I think in any case, people closest to your research area who you believe have even know your work and read your work, they have to be the strongest advocates. Whether or not they're in the search committee doesn't matter. Their opinion will be solicited. So I think chatting with faculty in your area, whether you meet them at a conference or you can set up a Zoom call with them, I think all of those can only help. They don't hurt. If they're not willing to chat with you, it means that somehow they're not excited about your candidacy, right? So if you think they like your work.
Yeah, I think we will go maybe some of this in more details
okay.
as well. But I think let's add, Lance, do you want to add anything from the dean side, essentially?
Yeah, a few things. First of all, I think you have to realize how unique computer science is here. In most other fields, there's maybe an annual meeting in January where a lot of pre-interviews is taking place, and then generally get wrapped up by late February, early March. So just about the time we're starting to make offers, other fields have pretty much finished the job. So it's a long, very long and lengthy process in computer science. And I think you're right. In most years, when I've been dean here or been chair at Georgia Tech, the number of people we've been allowed to hire has not been the limit. It's really been the number of, as long as you keep the quality, and we really do aim to keep the quality up. As long as you keep the quality up, the challenge is actually finding enough strength to hire into. because as you said, it would typically be, I mean, at Georgia Tech, the people we interviewed, maybe half we wanted to make offers, and maybe a third of those we actually came. So, it's like a 6-to-1 ratio of interviews to positions in the end at a good school. So, I think if you really want to be interviewed in certain places, I think, right, reaching out. If you can do it in person, I really recommend, if you're on the job market, going to conferences, trying to give talks at places, workshops, just going to find people in person, because it's easier to have those conversations one-on-one than I think it is to, just cold call or cold email someone and hoping to get a response, because trust me, people get a lot of these emails, and unless they know you personally already, it's not going to be easy to get through. So I think that's kind of what we have to do. And at some point we really need to talk about, what do you do if you have a partner and you're both looking for jobs in the same city? That becomes a whole new challenge, on both sides of the coin. So we can talk a little bit about that later.
Yeah, we heard about essentially from the academic side. I think, Nicole, I think you can actually compare this with the industrial research labs, that the process might be slightly different, but lots of them are essentially. So essentially, I will say that the research in industry, it is somehow a combination of academic one and more like just software engineering or other type of thing. I think you can add more to that essentially.
Yeah, so in my group, we're hiring into the research lab, and we're trying to hire basically people that are going to write papers on areas that we think are of a high priority for Microsoft, because we want to develop some thought leadership in that space, and we want to see kind of into the future so that we can help direct the company, so that they don't miss any big hits or important trends. And from that perspective, it's a little bit narrower in the way that we hire. So I'm the manager of the economics and computation group. When we hire into that group, we're going to form a committee of people on that group, which is essentially everybody in the group, including the postdocs, are going to interview people and talk about them. But they're much kind of, it's a different audience than a CS department, because they're all in the economics and computation space, and the diversity now is like how applied to how theoretical the group members are. Another difference, I think, is that we very rarely hire permanent people in industry. So we have, I think in CS departments, you tend to get a couple of positions every year, maybe not always in theory, but like in the department as a whole. At Microsoft, we hire postdocs pretty much every year, but that's basically it. Like the hiring somebody as a full-time employee is incredibly rare. And when we do hire full-time employees, we often go for people that are a little bit more senior.
Great. Yeah, and I think this is similar like this in other companies that I have been like at Amazon or Google. I think in general, point, it is interesting. You want to see whether you are in the research job or not, or mainly research or not. If it is a mainly research, I will say, or research is a big part of it, they will ask you to give a talk. Otherwise, this is a regular interview process that you will go there and you will talk with the individuals. So if they ask you to come and give a research talk, it happens essentially at Google or Amazon or Microsoft, etc., then it means that the research is important. Publication, etc., generally is important. So that's the point. And again, I mean, depending, there are sometimes, I think, freezes even in the companies. In that case, maybe VP, or some cases that I knew about it, that Amazon SVP needed to approve some position. So SVP and VP essentially just very similar to dean, provost. So again, we talk about chair, then dean, and after that provost, and generally after that the president of the universities. So similar thing, there are the different levels at industry, and the VP and SVP and the CTO, CEO, etc. that are on the hierarchies. Great. Now, having said that, let's discuss a little bit about the application process. I will ask a few questions. At the same time, I think please feel free to answer that if something is not covered. May ask again. But this is the main question. So if you want, and some of them we already discussed, but we want to add, what would be a successful job application for academic or research lab? what are the common mistakes that applicants may do essentially, or personally you think that like some of the things that if I was applying, I don't know, 20, 30 years ago, 40 years ago, then these are the mistakes that I wish that I knew or somebody has mentioned to me that I should not repeat or do it. And also this concept of essentially the research or teaching statement, how important are they versus CV? Yeah, I think that's like for now it was a good thing. So I may ask other question. I think we are starting with Lance now.
Okay. Well, I think, yeah, well, people are going to first just look at your record. So I think, making sure you have papers and good conferences is important. Make sure that everything you have is accessible. Don't make it hard to find that people find your papers. And then clean up things like Google Scholar. People like to go to Google Scholar, so make sure your Google Scholar information is correct. You can update it. A research statement, teaching statement, I find these things can't help you a lot, but they can hurt you a lot if you do it wrong. So try to do it right. Try not to be too fancy, but give a good reason, give a good story of your research and what you're really looking to do in the future. Teaching the other statements, I think, are, I mean, honestly, I don't know. It's good to have a good, well-written teaching statement, but I don't think it's that critical. I mean, the challenge is making yourself stand out from, 200 other applicants, especially if you say maybe you have one or two Fox papers or not a lot of publications. So I think it's just, you should apply aggressively, but it also doesn't hurt to try to follow up with people because that always helps. And like, go to conferences, as I said before. I think one thing that is really, really important is the job talk. So make sure that you pick the right. I mean, if I'm going to say a mistake that I made when I first applied back in as an undergrad, is I definitely picked the wrong top paper for a job talk. I picked an obscure Oracle paper.
I think the mistake that I made it actually for my. This is the same mistake that I made it actually for my first job talk essentially. The top. I mean, choosing a wrong essentially topic essentially.
Right. It's a very theoretical, it was a hard result to even get theory people excited about to get people outside of theory. And I think that really did hurt me in my initial set of interviews. But I think it is important to realize that you are talking to a broader audience. So at the very least, at the initial part of your talk, make sure that you properly motivate what you're doing and get people excited about it, people who are outside of your field. It doesn't hurt to pander to the topic of the day, which probably machine learning or AI. So if you can connect your paper to AI or some other important topic going on, I think that's a good thing without being too blatant about it. And but really find a way that says, I'm not just going to be someone hiding in my office proving theorems. I want to be out there helping you do your research, whatever topic you're in, or at least, being a productive member of the community, of the department. So I think that being able to reach other people, through your talk is important.
Yeah, I think one important thing that Lance mentioned, essentially, to have a broad topic when you give a presentation, and also show that you want to work with everyone in the department. And of course, that would be good to really do that. It's not necessary to do with everyone, but at least at the interview time, the people need to find some common interest with you. I think that will help you because they need to vote essentially, and they can give you higher vote, higher score to you if they feel that you can contribute to their area of research. So, Nicole, do you want to say anything in these things about, as I mentioned, I think the question you remember about the successful job, the mistakes, and what about the compelling? Do you even read the research statement or just maybe CV? I think one important thing is the recommendation letters, that it is beyond your hand in some sense, but maybe not completely like that. From who are the set of people that you need to get actually recommendation from?
Yeah, so we definitely look very heavily at recommendation letters. We're hiring across 2 different fields, or 3 even. And so the non-CS fields often have a job market paper. And therefore, as computer scientists also, it's very useful for you to submit a sample of your work, and we will look at that paper. Or a small set of papers, especially for computer scientists that are quite prolific, like AI fields, for example. There's often a lot of papers on your CV, and I need you to help me understand which one I should try to read. And so I would add that to what Lance said. That's maybe even more salient for me as a academic research hirer in industry, to see the papers than the research statement. But I do kind of glance at the research statement. What I'm trying to get a sense of is how well your interests mesh with those of the group and the direction of the group, because we are very small and we can't hire a lot. And so we need to make sure that we're pretty coherent as a group. In terms of reaching out, we have our job postings on our website. We don't post on CRA, but we do post on the website. And I get a lot of people reaching out to me, way more than I can possibly talk to, asking to meet with me to discuss whether this is a good fit for them. And I can't possibly reply to all of these. It's almost like asking for a pre-interview. So I just started saying, please just apply. And we do look at every single person that applies. Like, we have that privilege because as a very narrow group, we don't maybe get as many applications as a CS department. So yeah, if you see me in the hallway at EC, you can chat to me about the jobs, but I'm very unlikely to meet you one-on-one virtually prior to the application review. And then in terms of once you're invited for a talk, I agree that you need to make sure your talk is comprehensible to everyone in the room, which spans from theory to empirical in our case. I also think it's good to have, I think one mistake people make is, especially in computer science, is they try to cover too much and they are a little bit too broad even. Like, I would rather you kind of tell me the overarching agenda of your research and then dive into one paper or one example so that I can really understand one thing that you've done pretty deeply, and then see how it fits into your larger research agenda, as opposed to like telling me a theorem from each of your last 10 papers.
Yeah, that is, I think, very super important. I mean, the people want to generally, see depth essentially, I think, in job talk especially. Maybe you want to talk a little bit about general things. I will say, during, like, say, if you have, say, 15 minutes essentially for the things you may want to go, 10, 20 minutes essentially general things. But at least you need to go 20 minutes essentially to details, because the people want to see that. Maybe at this point, not everyone can understand it. Of course, you should try your best that they understand. But that is fine, because somehow, the people in the field should understand the part of it. If they don't understand, that is not also.
But also, when I'm saying,
it shows the depth essentially.
When I'm asking for depth, I don't necessarily mean that I want you to prove a theorem to me. Like, I don't need to see the details. I love people using PowerPoint for slides as opposed to Beamer, because it makes it hard to write down formulas. And honestly, a job talk should not have very much, if any, notation. So it's not that you need to prove the theorem. It's that you need to explain the setting, explain why it's important, explain the contribution. If the contribution is somewhat technical, you can sort of discuss the tools that you use to address the problem, but don't go and line by line prove a theorem for me.
Yeah, I meant here, by intuition of the details. Why the thing that you are doing in different steps, you prove this theorem. You don't need to, prove everything. The only thing is that you want to give some kind of essentially roadmap. How do you prove it? Why this is challenging? Why this is what's important to solve, etc. These are the things that you may need to go the details. And some part you may say, okay, I'm using that. This is the important thing. Sometimes you may talk a little bit in more details than that. So that I think the mistake we talk about it. Sam, if you want to.
Yeah, I want to add maybe a couple of things. So one is about the application itself and this discussion about how much of a role the research student plays. So here's my observations. out of the applicants, I would say once the search committee gets to work and filters down to, let's say, 1/3 of the top applicants, just purely based on CV is my guess. I mean, I don't know what's going on in every person's mind as they're looking at the application. But then the research statement is read. So for example, the theory group, once we decided in the top 15, 20 candidates, we looked at those packets very carefully to decide which subset would get a Zoom interview and then which subset would get invited. Second comment I would make is about letter writers. So it happened to me, for example, there was a student who took a class with me as a first-year PhD student, excelled in the course, got an A in the course. And then they were working in a different field. I didn't hear from them. And then just before they were graduating, now they needed 4 reference letters. And they came to me and said, I took this class with you 5 years ago. Can you write a letter for me? And I was like, literally any letter I write now is not going to help your case that much, right? Because I don't work in your field and not in your thesis committee. I don't know anything that you've done in the last few years. So that's something that students need to start thinking about very early, is when they go on the job market. And that's why I think doing postdocs is quite valuable. Like what Nicole said, if Microsoft, you get a postdoc at Microsoft Research, that's amazing. You'll get an opportunity to go and collaborate with some amazing people. And then, you can ask a couple of your collaborators for reference letters when you start applying for faculty positions or full-time industry positions. So I think it's really great if you can build up a portfolio, a network of strong collaborators where they can actually endorse strongly what you brought to the table and what you brought to the collaboration. So that's kind of what we are looking for when we are reading these letters. And it sometimes really impresses us that some professor at some different school who knows about the work and reached out to collaborate with this, say, PhD student, was writing about the work. And to me, that's like a strong signal of somebody who's not your immediate advisor, but is really somebody who thinks very highly of you and your work. About the job talk, yeah, I think I agree with everything that was said. I'm usually looking for the candidate to present at least like a pair of results and how they're related. So it kind of gives me some sense for where they're going. And I would just also add that 20, 25 minutes into a job talk, I sort of have already made up my mind. So it is more, like Nicole said, you really have to make a very strong case and be an advocate for your area. So just to give you an example, like in any area, we might interview people, like machine learning is also a broad field. So we bring in people with slightly different backgrounds. Some people are doing much more theoretical work. Some people are doing, more applied work. They're working with data. But half an hour into the talk, people should really be blown away and be impressed. Like, this is really an important thing that we as a department should strongly think about investing in. So it's okay for the first 25 minutes to be very broad. You're reaching everybody. And then to spend 15 minutes doing maybe a slightly deeper dive into your contributions. Yeah, that's all I have to say.
Great. So I think now let me ask, now we talk about job market and job talk. Let's talk a little bit about the whole interview process, because it is very important. That might be a bit different industry versus the research lab. So here, the one question that when somebody invites you for interview, one question is that whether should you go as early as possible or you're essentially flexible, because they may not put that much conditions on you. So I think that is one question. Then the other thing is that when you talk with the people there might be this is another issue that you may have a two-body problem. It's a very common problem. Should you just bring it right away or maybe wait later? When you talk with the people may ask, I don't know, I will say rude, but maybe say it's a bit, some questions which are uncomfortable for you, how you should essentially address it. Another issue is that, in the research, so I think let's answer these things, then we will talk more about some other questions. So I think let's go with Sami.
Sure. So I think the earlier the department chair knows about any two-body issue that you have, the more valuable it is. And like Lance said, the job markets in different fields are different timing. So it certainly happened to us that, when we got ready to making an offer to somebody in mid-March or late March is when they first alerted us to the fact that they had a partner who had also applied to another department at Northwestern. And by that time, when I typically reach out, it's too late. Those people respond saying, our search is basically over. We made, 2 offers. One got accepted, one got turned down, and we're done for the year. So we are basically in a position where we cannot do anything about it. So the earlier you're able to at least talk to the chair about this situation, maybe even at the time of the invitation of the interview, once you've been invited out, if your interview is like next week, then it's fine to bring it up on the interview. But the earlier, I as chair know about the situation, I think the more helpful it is. Because in the end, if we cannot resolve that and it's a deal breaker, then really the whole thing was pointless, right? So So the earlier we know, the better it is. In terms of timing, I would think if there's a place that you really want to go to, don't make it your first job talk. So I think there'll be many things you'll discover when you give your first job talk is how people react to it, the kind of questions you ask, and you'll be much smoother the second time around. So that's my observation over 10 years of watching candidates.
I think, Samir,
Yeah,
one fear is that what if it's not a deal breaker? Like, what if it's just hugely desirable, but maybe Chicago, Detroit is commutable for, right? Like, and if I tell you, then maybe you're gonna update on that.
Yeah. So then, I mean, for the chair to obviously know is important either way. And you can make it clear at the time at which an offer is going to be made to you. There's always a gap. So for example, before we generate an offer letter, I usually have a call with the candidate and I have a chat with them and I say, I'm going to make a recommendation to the dean to putting an offer on the table. Once the day you get the offer letter, the clock starts to tick and you have about 3 weeks. So let's talk a little bit both about your decision-making process. Some people will say, I'm interviewing at, Stanford, MIT, Microsoft Research, Georgia Tech in the next month. There's no way I'm going to make a decision in the next 3 weeks. And then we might even hit the pause button and say, let's wait a little bit. We like this candidate, but we do want to make an offer. And certainly today we are in an environment where, because of multiple positions, we are allowed to making twice the number of offers simultaneously as the number of positions, right? So we do have a fair bit of room for candidates who we like. In terms of the two-body situation, yeah, if it's within CS, that's something that our faculty can immediately weigh in on. But if it's outside in another department, really my hands are tied. And so either way, if it's a deal breaker, it's good to let us know. If you're still going to consider it because you have some avenues that you can pursue, not at Northwestern, but in the Chicago area, that's also good for us to know.
Great. So, Nicole, do you want to add anything else? So maybe also answer this thing. Like when you go, if the people may ask some questions that you are uncomfortable to answer. One other question that I know actually, say you have some unpublished results. Sometimes you want to actually mention that to the people that they become essentially more excited because they ask. But at the same time, generally, if it is the paper is not, fully essentially presented like or being like made it public, it's a bit dangerous essentially. So how do you feel about it? Do you share, for example, your important unpublished results? If somebody asks questions, maybe a bit rude, how do you answer?
Well, let me add on a little bit to what people have said before. I think we have a lot here. One is, as far as two-body, I definitely agree it's best if the department knows as early as possible. And also, don't be afraid to ask even just for, even if it's not in academia. I mean, we often have a lot of connections or alumni have a lot of connections. There was one case where Georgia Tech where the partner was in the film industry. And and Atlanta has a good film industry. I was able to connect them and that helped nail down a position for her and we got him. And so it all worked out. As far as uncomfortable questions go, well, also I wanted to make the point, I don't know if everyone knows this, but we're very restricted when we're interviewing people about what we're allowed to ask for. So we can't ask you if you have a partner issue, we can't ask you about your children, we can't ask you about, are you going to get pregnant? We can't ask you about your sexual preferences, your national origin, your religion. I mean, there's a whole bunch of things we're not allowed to ask you. So it's not like we can say, I mean, even at any point really, except maybe after we make the offer, if there are issues with the, two-body problem or, where are good places to live, if you have kids, those kinds of things. We just, because you can tell us if you want to, but we can't ask you. So if we're not asking you, that's why we're not doing it.
Sorry, Lance, if somebody asks what would be the approach, because I know that these are like, for example, about two-body, the people ask explicitly. What should be the answer that they should give?
What?
So
if somebody
so I'm
asks,
saying that like if somebody asks about like your two-body situation or some about I don't know some question that they should not ask, what would be the best way to answer?
I mean, it depends on the level. I mean, if they ask you an uncomfortable question, there's loads of uncomfortable questions they could ask you, and you just don't want to answer the best. I mean, try not to be rude about it because that's not going to help you. I mean, even if you're legitimately allowed to be rude about it, but it's not going to help you. So the best thing to do is sort of change the topic of the conversation if that's possible.
That's
So
what
I
would you
also
rather
like.
not talk about that, or rather ask you questions about this or something like this?
I was advising someone on the market who
Mhm.
had a question of this nature, and ex post after accepting a job, reached out to the chair, accepting a job elsewhere, it turned out, but like reached out to the chair to kind of let them
Yeah,
know.
I would let if you're interviewing with a faculty member and they ask something inappropriate, um, yeah, I definitely will let the chair know. I mean, when you should let the chair know, maybe after the time is over,
Yeah,
but that the
but I
chair
will say
knows.
this is also even tricky because the chair probably does not want, I mean, this as assistant professor, they don't want to bring a person that essentially complained about anything to the chair about other faculties. I don't know
Oh
if
no, no. I mean, I need to know. I mean, as chair or as dean, I need to know if a
Yeah.
faculty is asking inappropriate questions so that we can at least have a conversation at faculty so they know this is inappropriate. Or in some cases, we've prevented those faculty from meeting candidates at all if they consistently be inappropriate. But even in the case where I was interviewing somewhere and a faculty member didn't ask me inappropriate questions, but they just completely trashed the department I was interviewing at. I told the
Oh,
chair
wow.
so that they would know that this, maybe you shouldn't have this person meet candidates.
Yeah.
okay. So, Nicole, do you want to add anything else? I think you want to add something in that.
No, I think this is a good advice. Like, try to be polite and deal with the problematic cases afterwards by talking to the chair when
I mean,
you.
I think it's needed. Maybe because, as I mentioned, maybe some negative things might be related to that. If you because I mean that person, if the chair then goes to talk with that
You
faculty
can also,
just
by the
during the
way,
interview,
talk to your advisor. So
Mhm.
in this
that
case,
might be a good option
I
actually.
wasn't this
Because
person's advisor anyway, but in this case, I heard about this and with their permission, reached out to the chair. And it wasn't even clear which candidate this was about because I wasn't that connected to the candidate. So you can talk to people that are your like sponsors, mentors in your
Mhm.
career paths, and they can help advocate for you in these cases.
so I think this one maybe just finish this one. So I think any of you want to answer. So this is about so if you have some unpublished results, what should be the level of privacy that you are doing in interviews? How much you should essentially protect? Maybe don't reveal it because you are still working on the problem. And I mean, who knows? Maybe that person, I mean, and there is nothing written. So, Samir, do you want to answer that?
Yeah, sure. So in what I would do, I can only talk about what I would do. I would actually include it part of my job talk if it was related. And I would say, oh, recently I've been working on these, like towards the end of the talk, which talks about future directions, which is an important part of a job talk. You have to make it very clear what you're going to be working on for the next 3 to 5 years at the very least. So I think it's okay to say, here's my long-term vision. This is the progress towards the vision. These are results I have right now, and they are being submitted to a conference next week or whatever, right? I think basically anything that you say that helps your case, in my opinion, is a good thing to say. Yes, there is a danger, as you pointed out, that somebody sitting in the audience, it doesn't have to be a professor, it could be a PhD student of that university who's sitting and hears about your result and uses that information in some way. I mean, that's unethical, but that could happen. So there is a danger of revealing things that are unpublished. But in an interview, I think I would just take the risk and say everything that I've done, helping my case. But I'm not saying everybody's going to come to that conclusion.
Think there's some kind of evaluation that each person should do it. So, and I think also we talked about the interview order. I think that's something that I wanted to add. I think we talked about it. I mean, Sammy, I think that was very important that you should not go if it is important place for you. Don't go first.
Yeah.
Actually, do some essentially trial before going there.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I have seen actually two essentially top places in top universities that people essentially they went and they were very good. The only reason that they didn't get the job because someone and they have been told that okay, we will consider all applicants, I don't know, in theory or ML together. But naturally, some of these people may have other deadlines, and then they are asking the chair, and the chair may need to decide at that time. So even though there might be actually this is, I mean, truth that they try to do it, but it may not happen. So I think if you like a place, try to, do some trial before, but go as soon as possible. Because it might be the case someone else get the job and they don't have the job, as Samir also mentioned, for two-body problems. Because if somebody gets the job because of order, etc., you may not get it. And so it's not completely fair process in some sense. That is one thing. One also question actually the people at YouTube asked also that should we essentially go to the conferences, etc. I think that was the main thing that Lance mentioned, and also Nicole added to that, that it is very hard for the people essentially, I don't know, in the field even, or the senior manager, etc., to talk with everyone. The best way to, and as also mentioned, like if you know the person, if you know a person that you try to apply for like a university or company that person is there, if that person knows you in person, that helps a lot. So it is actually very beneficial for you to the conference that try to meet in other places, not just on the time that you try to apply. Maybe a year before, you should start going to some conferences, etc., so that you will meet the person. Because at that time, you can actually talk and know about it. Maybe even in the conference, that person came to your talk, so you can essentially can even discuss that time. And this is something that will not happen if you try to interview, because lots of people are doing that, and the people are busy essentially. So that's, I think, one important thing that we wanted to cover. Another thing about the phone interview. I think, I don't know, Samir or Lance, are you doing phone interviews? Because phone interviews actually, when I was in the chair of the search committee, actually, I didn't do that. So that because I know that some places they just send the invite, not for interview. But several places are doing that because, especially with Zoom now, the quality is high, so the people can have. What are the generally? I think, to my experience, it takes maybe 20 minutes essentially with one or two or three faculty sometimes. How you should prepare for that, because that's a bit different from the regular things. Yeah.
So when we did phone interviews, I'm happy to interject what we did, because we did a few small number of Zoom interviews. So typically, like a couple of candidates, we would just issue invitations to, because we thought there was no way in which we would not interview this person, right? But then we still had a list of, like, let's say 8-10 people, and we were trying to narrow down to 3 candidates from that. So we did Zoom interviews. Typically, these are 30-minute2 just like you said, 2 to 3 faculty on the Zoom interview. We would record it so other members of the group could watch it later if they weren't available at the time. And the main focus was whether or not the candidate can clearly communicate what they have done, what they want to do to us. So typically, the meeting would open with us just giving a brief introduction of, what are our priorities in the search this year, talk for 3 minutes about the department, introduce the faculty who are on the Zoom call. And then we switch to the candidate and have them tell us about what they've worked on, what are their favorite results. So it's very results-focused discussion for about 15 minutes. And then we may ask some questions, and then we will open the floor for them to answer any questions towards the end. So the whole thing lasts 26 to 28 minutes. And it's nice to have a couple of questions ready as a candidate, right? It's odd when the meeting ends and we ask them, do you have any questions about Northwestern? And if they have not one question, that makes them an unusual candidate. But yeah, just being able to articulate very clearly what you are excited about, what you work on in a 5 to 7 minute statement. I think that every candidate needs to think very clearly about how they're going to say those words.
I think to add 2 things that is very important, essentially. One is that be prepared for that, because I have seen the people that actually were not that prepared. I mentioned, okay, we want you, but this is not the level. You need to really be prepared and know a little bit about it. This is somehow interview, because you may not actually get the actual interview if that doesn't go well. And the other thing I think that is mentioned in both industry and academia, asking questions is important. If essentially when you go for interview, talks is 30 minutes with a person, and the person all the time, this is a very common thing. What are the questions that if you don't know really any questions, just go and ask ChatGPT. What are the appropriate questions that you should ask at the end? Because that's actually very important. And if you don't ask anything, I don't have anything, it means that somehow the people feel that you are not that much interested to the place. And that may have a very bad effect, essentially. So always ask, try to, of course, surely there are some questions. Again, if you don't have any question in your mind, just ask ChatGPT.
I should point out that this is very much a computer science norm. So economics departments, in these 30-minute pre-interviews, you're up until very recently, the advice was, no, thank you, I have no questions at this time.
Oh, really?
So you need to make sure you know the norm of the field. I agree, for computer science, we expect questions. But for economists, it could hurt you if you ask the quote wrong question. Like you want to ask questions that suggest that you've done your homework, you know the place, and yeah, you're asking.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, if you haven't
it
had
should be a
time to do the
smart anything.
homework, you could also ask questions like, what do you like about your own department? What are the strongest selling points? What is the culture like? So there are questions that which are without spending a lot of time understanding the place that you can ask. I think that those are all valid questions and will help you make a more informed decision about where you want to be later on. Yeah.
Great. So now another question actually from Lars, I think, like that is as well from the dean side. How, I mean, when you should negotiate about the salaries, job offers, and other packages. I mean, there might be some other important things, like there are startup packages, teaching load, maybe some lab you want to have it. Sometimes you want to take 1 or 2 semesters off. When is a good time to discuss that? How you should focus essentially on that? Which one is easier for the dean or chair to give essentially those things? Which ones are harder? I think we start with Lance.
Yeah, I mean, there's so first of all, I wouldn't negotiate until you have an offer. Some people try to do it beforehand. I think that's a mistake. Um, but when you have an offer, first of all, negotiate. I think there's too many people who just don't even try. Um, so make sure that you actually, try to negotiate things. Salary, especially if you're a new assistant professor, tends to be fixed. I mean, it doesn't hurt to ask for more money, but don't expect to get much more. And don't ask for like some ridiculous amount, but ask for, a reasonable amount. Startup, I think, is something legitimately to negotiate for, but it's something that you should justify. So you should say, well, I really could use, 100, say 200,000 to buy a computer cluster, and this is why I need it. I mean, this is a lot bigger issue for non-theorists than theorists. Um, uh, but it's, for theory people, I think it's, important to ask for travel funds, particularly, but also for student support. Maybe you can get an extra student. We usually leave a little flexibility in the packages so that students, that we can help, like maybe a a systems person we give more equipment to, a theory person we can give more maybe more of an extra grad student support or something so that we can try to help everyone. But it's important to ask. But I'm going to say, there really isn't that much flexibility. Uh, and I'd be, when you're choosing which place to go, I wouldn't do it based on who's giving you the biggest salary and the largest package. It's go to the place where you can be the most successful. Because that's in the end, that's where because the rest isn't. I mean, you're going to get, it's the grants, the other things that are going to really propel yourself. So where are you going to have the best colleagues? Where are you going to be able to get the best students? Where are you going to feel more comfortable, be able to do the research you want to do? Those and also maybe it depends on where you want to live. Those or if you have the two-body problem, that's important. But those are the things that I think are bigger than are you going to get an extra? Are you going to get an extra student for a couple of years? So don't get too hung up. I mean, it's good to negotiate. It's silly not to ask, but don't get so hung up on it that you end up saying, "Oh, I'm really pissed at this university because they wouldn't give me as much as that university." I think really focus on where can I be the most successful.
So, and Nicole, actually, one question that also was asked. So, is there anything other than about the packages? Might be the university is a bit wider thing for the industry research lab. Is there anything other than your whole package in terms of money, which is important that you may ask or negotiate? I'm talking. Yeah, I think Nicole.
I mean, you could ask for some course reduction. You could ask for a shorter tenure clock if you have some reason for it. You could ask for. I mean, you can ask for anything.
Yeah, no, I'm talking about.
I mean, I've seen people ask for all sorts of stuff. Doesn't mean you'll get it, but I think you might want to negotiate a start date. Maybe you want to start 6 months later, a year later. I mean, there's all sorts of. I wouldn't. Don't be afraid to ask. At that point, and this is what my advisor told me to do. Once you get the offer, everything flips, and now the department or the university really wants to get you. It's almost like there's no, before that, you're really angling to get the offer. But once you get the offer, the department really wants to get you. So, and this is your one chance to be able to ask for things. It's when you have the most leverage. So this is the time to say, here's what I need. And don't be afraid of it, some weird thing that maybe you want. Maybe you want to get your kid into the local like University of Chicago. We have this lab school for kids. You want to get your kid into the lab school. I mean, go try asking. So it's I wouldn't be afraid to ask for just about anything, and just realize that there's a limited number of things that the department or the dean or anybody can do.
Yeah, so I think, and Nicole, do you want to answer? What about for research lab? What else other than whole package or salary is important?
So we're pretty much only hiring postdocs, and for that, there's not any room for negotiation.
But what about, like, for example, but you have been, at the time that they have hired essentially before for permanent position. What about there? Are there other things, that other than salary they can negotiate at industry?
So when I was interviewing at Microsoft, there wasn't really much to ask for. I told Microsoft at the time that, like, my particular research modality is to travel a ton and go to a lot of different workshops. And so this was pre-pandemic, of course. And I was like, so I'm not going to be present like every day 9 to 5, I'm going to be traveling a lot. And I just want to make sure you're comfortable with that. It's not something that went in writing anywhere, but so I don't know if it even counts as negotiation, but that was like the kind of thing I wanted to make sure we're on the same page about, so it doesn't come back to bite me later.
Yeah, so I think there are these two important, so things that you mentioned. So maybe some money for the travel, essentially. That is also even the industrial labs that is important. So that's some kind of a startup, essentially, that you may want to essentially ask.
Yeah, but industry, like, we get a budget from Amy Hood who's the CFO of Microsoft every year, and we have to adjust every year. You can't really promise things in industry, unlike in academia. We can't be given control over a pot of money. That's just not how industry works, at least not how Microsoft works.
I think another thing also at both industry and academia is essentially for promotion, especially if you have been outside, you may want to negotiate that you want to go early promotion. I think the same thing also you can mention it at the research lab and industry. But again, as you mentioned correctly, Nicole, there is no guarantee. You may talk about it. I will say, there is no guarantee, even I will say in academia, but there may be, if it is written in your offer, sometimes it means something and you can actually negotiate. But I think for industry, you can ask for it. The people may actually consider it if there's a possibility. But if there is some reorg, then your manager may change. So anything that you promised or she promised, it may be.
Things are more fluid in industry, which I think is both a plus and a minus. Like it's a little reactive, but it's also more fluid.
I just want to quickly add to that. I think Lance made a very important point. Once the offer is made, the equation flips a little bit and the university really wants to get you. So I can just say, me as chair is working the hardest possible to get the candidate whatever they need to be successful in their research, right? So I am negotiating with the dean and trying to explain why this is important. So justifying why you want a higher startup or whatever, teaching release, everything, the more ammunition you give the chair, they're really working on your behalf in trying to get you the best deal possible. Second, I would say is make sure everything is in the offer letter written, because chairs change, deans change. And so it has to be in the offer letter written that exactly what you expect. And maybe some things you're negotiating that, in 2 years from now, I'm going to have a lab of this size and I need space. So all of that you need in writing as part of the offer letter.
So Samuel, actually one question for you. So what would be the role of advisor when a person, like essentially PhD or a postdoc, applies? What should, an advisor do, and what are the responsibility for him or her? Others can add to it.
If you are completely new to the job market and don't know what to negotiate, it is perfectly okay to. When we make an offer letter, it says there, this is a confidential offer letter to you. And partly because, the different candidates are asking for different things. And exactly as Lance said, for somebody, equipment is more important. And I have to argue that they need an extra $150K to buy this GPU. But for this other person, they don't care about the GPU. This other thing is important. So the challenge that we have is that sometimes candidates are sharing all these parameters. And then I will get a call from a candidate saying, hey, just give me a higher startup because I heard from somebody else that another candidate was made an offer with a slightly higher startup. So you cannot just maximize every single dimension and
sorry, I think the question that I asked, what is the role of advisor?
Yeah, you can share the offer letter with the advisor and get their input on what you should ask for sure. Yeah.
No, I'm talking about the advisor of your advisor, PhD advisor. So what, like if my students want to apply, go to the job market, what are my responsibilities?
Oh, I see. Yeah, if your advisor is very excited about, your application and excited that you're graduating and think that you're a good fit at some schools, I think if they have contacts there, they will reach out, and that will get you more likely a Zoom meeting with somebody in that department than not. So I think the advisor can play a role in helping connect you. Their email will be read. The PhD student's email might not be read. Yeah. So they
think
can certainly help.
also for job talk is like advisor and set of people. I mean, that is super important that they will come to your job talk, give the talk. I think that is one of the things that is definitely essentially the responsibility of the advisor.
Yes.
That if I have not done, give it. I mean, of course, the applicant should prepare a lot and exercise a lot. But the topic and all things, I think these are some of the things the advisor should have a say, or maybe not just advisor. You can have a set of senior people in your university and they can help you. I think here at UMD we have that. Lance, anything about the advisor role? Nicole, want to add?
Well, I mean, just use your advisor whenever you have like these kinds of questions. I mean, anything we talked about today, if you're not sure, it's always good to check with your advisor. Is it, I mean, questions about your job talk, question about where you should apply, question about when you should interview, questions about how to negotiate the offer. If you have a good relationship with your advisor, they're probably the most reliable person to talk to about these things.
I would just add, it doesn't necessarily have to be your advisor formally, right? Like you should figure out who are your career mentors and and like, maybe even make that explicit to them. Like, I think of Lance and Eva for Twardosh, for example, as mentors for me, and I turn to them for advice from time to time, even now. And like, so you identify who those people are in your life, and then you go to them and ask them to help you with your job talk, help you with your elevator pitch. We haven't talked about that very much, but you should have a 3-minute, like a 1 minute, 3 minute, 5 minute version of how, like, if I get 1 minute of somebody's attention, what do I say to them, right? Like, so these kinds of things.
Yeah, I think that is super important, especially for an interview, because that kind of elevator pitch, like 5 minute things essentially, or 10 minutes essentially, is super important. And also very important because lots of people in the interview, they may not come to your talk. Still, they will ask you, they may say, okay, sorry, I had a class, etc. So you need to prepare something to maybe mention fast to them essentially. Sometimes also the different levels, I think, are important, 1, 2, 3, because sometimes maybe there are some schedules, something is messed up, and then you will talk with the person only 10 minutes. And I mean, you should essentially be prepared to present like 2 minutes version of that. And then they will ask their things, the questions from them, etc. So this is the elevator pitch is super important. Essentially, much shorter version of your job talk, and no presentation, no slide, nothing. You need to talk, and you need to have done enough exercise such that you can go very smoothly on that. That's especially for phone interview is important. So, one other question. So I think we had similar question also in the live chat. So, what about between industry? What would be the difference, like early on, between, like, if I want to apply for industry research labs and or academia? I mean, what are the criteria that I need to consider it and like to maybe push for either of them essentially? Of course, I mean there are some kind of what is the work-life balance, something that comes later. But what are the most important ones that upfront that I should know when I want to interview? And I know I'm interviewing for research lab versus academia, because you have been in both. Yeah.
You mean choosing between industry and research? Is that what you're asking? Or
so I'm saying that when you go essentially, like if early on, if you want to decide you want to go for academia or industry, what are the criteria that you need to consider?
You're saying like, how can we tailor our application? Like, how can you tailor your application to one versus the other? Or are you saying like, should I apply to one versus the other?
I mean, the whole process, like interview process, etc. Like how much like the research lab position interview is different from the academic position. Yeah. And how the applicant should tailor to essentially one of them. especially
I
to
know,
industry.
if you're trying to think about industry versus research, to me, it's mostly about the students. To me, especially with PhD students, you really build this really close relationship when you're an advisor as a professor and you get to teach. And at a lab, you get these postdocs, but they feel more temporary or you're working with students, but it feels less directly connected. I know when I was a short period of time at a research
So I
lab.
think maybe one point is that when you go as like a faculty, right away you become a mentor as long as you do start it. But in the research lab, that may happen, but maybe after several years, that you may become more senior. At the beginning, you may not have that many essentially, even
Right.
postdocs or students to work with.
Yeah,
Maybe intern you can get it.
Yeah, the other thing I would say is, and it's not a hard and fast rule, but in general, it's a lot easier to go from academia to industry than industry to academia. So if you're not sure, I would start in academia. And then if you realize you just hate teaching and you just want to focus and the lab gives you a better place for you, or for whatever reason a lab might feel better for you, then you can kind of always switch over. But it's a little bit harder to switch back because maybe you don't have the teaching experience or working directly with students.
Yeah, so one thing I've done while in industry is taught at Harvard. So a lot of industry research labs will allow you to teach a course if you want to, and they all have moonlighting policies, and so maintaining ties to academia can be valuable if you want to leave that door open.
Great.
I think the main question, Nicole, that I've heard at discussions, especially when hiring somebody who's been at a research lab for a long time, is will they be able to develop their own independent funding streams and so on? So that's the biggest question that has usually come up. But in terms of trying to decide for yourself, I think you need to understand yourself well. The main difference is, I think, as a faculty member, nobody comes and tells you what research to work on and do. My impression, and I could be wrong, in companies is that sometimes there are very clear goals for groups. So you will be given a little bit more guidance early on in terms of what topics to work on and what projects to pursue. Because the company has some goals and they want to make sure that whatever you're doing, you're contributing in some way to the success of the company. Whereas in academia, you're contributing to your own success. Nobody will come and tell you what to work on next. So it gives you much more flexibility and freedom, which
I think that
can
depends
be great for some.
That depends very much on the research lab and maybe even the research group that you're applying to. So and also
funding
for postdocs, I don't think it's relevant at all. Postdocs do whatever they do, and we're just trying to have great people around to inspire us.
So, I think some people maybe, that at least early on in research lab, they may consider it like some kind of extended postdoc. That may consider, I'm not so sure it's the correct statement, but then sometimes you have some of the less responsibility. Again, if you go higher up, then it's different. You need to manage lots of people. You need to do essentially help the company for the product, etc. There's a lot of responsibility. But maybe early on as a research lab, actually, you are a bit more relaxed comparing to a faculty regarding funding of the students, mentoring the PhD students, teaching courses, etc. That some of them essentially are not there, or at least volunteering. So
not having a PhD student, I think that, as Lance said, is the main difference. When you can have, interns in industry, you can even have repeat interns, but it's very different from taking someone who just graduated from undergrad, developing them throughout the course of 5 plus years, and then graduating them as a completely full-fledged researcher. They are, in a sense, your product, and in industry, your papers are your product.
Okay, so I think we try to keep this one essentially a shorter one, such that everyone can watch it. So because of that, we are now going for the closing statement. I think I want that we are talking about is some closing statement. And during this, you may want to give any advice that you wish that someone has given to you in general about the process. If you have some setback in your process, essentially, and then you could recover from that. That would be good personal things. And or the thing that you want, why you are here, essentially, the whole path. Have you been happy with that? Anything you wanted to change it? You may want to add in addition of any, essentially, advice that you have. I think we start with Samuel.
Oh, sure. There's many things that over time, experience gives you. I would say resilience is important. I think there are times when things don't go your way and you have to figure out how to recover from that and get up and do the things that you're passionate about and continue doing them. I mean, in terms of specific examples, I don't want to get into details, but yes, I mean, every time that you're in any situation over a long period of time, there are going to be hiccups, challenges, unexpected things that happen. And so you're going to have to deal with them and just get up and dust off and start again, So there's no doubt that these things will happen. Since I'm less time constrained than our other two panelists, let them go, and then I'm happy to stay on for another 3, 4, 5 minutes at the end.
Go ahead.
Okay. Well, I know when I interviewed, it took me, I didn't have my first offer until stock of that year. I was at the conference, like, what am I supposed to do? I should try to reach out to people but I was like in this paralyzed phase. But then Simon came up to me and said they were going to make me an offer. Life a lot easier. But until then, I was kind of panicking. And I think the thing to do is just keep persevering, keep saying, just keep trying. The job market's a very long process. And don't necessarily just accept the first offer you get.
Yeah.
Sometimes people will get an offer, they'll get a deadline, but really think about it. Really think about, be willing to take a little risk and go to a place where, you could go to a place where, it's going to be easy to get tenure, you'll have a decent life. Or you can go to a place where you can really try to push yourself. And I think it's better to try and push yourself and have a successful career that way.
Yeah.
And Nicole, do you want to add anything?
Yeah.
Essentially, you mentioned about the setback and the thing. Like one thing that you wish that you change, you have done this change essentially in your whole career path. If you can have such a point you want to mention.
Me or?
Yeah, if you want, essentially, but you can say essentially about the whole thing.
Yeah,
some
I guess
bit of advice.
The job market is very stressful, very anxiety inducing. It kind of sucks if you go on it and get the postdoc and then you have to go on it again. And like the whole concept of not having tenure, like you might not have a stable life until you're 40. And all of this is super overwhelming. And I think, it's just good to acknowledge that it was overwhelming for me. It's overwhelming for everybody. And then once you acknowledge that, you can think about, what are the pleasures of it? One thing is it's really fun to go around and meet all these cool people that are interested in your research, and you get to tell them about it, and it's fun to meet everyone. Another thing is I think it's good to acknowledge that there's not, and this comes with maturity, and it's a little hard when you're just on the job market. You're also quite young, but there's not just one right path in life. Like something's going to work out. You're going to find a way that you're going to be happy and productive, and maybe it won't be what you thought it was, the path that you thought it was, but you're going to be okay. So I think that's what I wish I had known.
Simon, do you want to add?
Yeah, sure. I think I wanted to quickly add. So first, Northwestern, we're still hiring at the junior level this year. We have multiple positions open that you can find on our website. But I did want to add something that occurred to me. So sometimes we have candidates who we interviewed, and just that, they were good candidates, but the support for other candidates was higher, and other candidates were made offers, and then the positions all filled up, and we could not make an offer to somebody. And they reached out to ask me like, hey, I interviewed there like 8 weeks, 2 months have gone by, I haven't heard back, what's going on? And, the best piece of advice I tell them is that, when I was in the job market applying everywhere in 1992, I also applied to Northwestern. I didn't even get an interview. And look, I'm here now. So, things will work out eventually. Just because we couldn't make you an offer this year doesn't mean if you really think this is the right place for you, consider us again in the future and maybe things will work out. So yeah, you just want to try to give people some level of understanding that it is a very anxiety-inducing process. And it's not perfect, right? So there are sometimes strong candidates who, whatever, fail to communicate the excitement of their work to some sector of the department, and a whole bunch of people voted no to make them an offer. And if there wasn't enough support, we couldn't make them offer. Yeah.
Correct. I think one last thing that I wanted to also mention essentially is important that the people don't think that this is the first job that I will get. It will be my job forever. No, you may change it actually. You may go from industry, you may go from academia to industry or vice versa. As long as you are active in research, actually you can be. I enjoyed a lot actually be with lots of companies while also have been a professor, and that helped me a lot. And I think you will go there, you have a different environment, you know the. For example, the industry, you will understand the problem. Some of this about map reduce stuff that we saw the importance of Google, for example. Then we have actually came and built the whole theory on them. I think it is super important. Don't think that this is the last thing. Of course, the main thing that keep you alive is essentially publish. I mean, a strong conference and like a top conferences, and try to advise PhD students or like I don't know postdocs or mentees that you have essentially in the industrial labs. That will help you. As long as you have it, you can change your position and go from one place to other things or take admin positions, etc. I think that's it. Any last thing? If not, I think we are almost on time for that. I hope that the people enjoyed. I mean, we may have more series. I mean, same set or other set of people as well for other topics. Thanks everyone essentially for joining again. Thank all of you, Samir, Nicole, and Lance for joining this. Hopefully the people enjoyed that and something that they can everyone watch it and essentially before applying, especially nowadays, this is the time for applying for jobs. So that's the thing that we try to put it now, such that the people have some ideas. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mohammed, for inviting us to participate, and great pleasure to be with my fellow colleagues, Lance and Nicole, on this panel.
Yeah, thanks for doing this.
Okay, thanks a lot and bye.
Bye.
Closing.